We are live. Hello, hello. Say hi when you hop on, as always, but I am excited to be here, um, especially when everything is working. Yay, super awesome. So, last week in the Everyday Crown Rocker group on Facebook, the trivia question, which Joe was the first to answer and got it correct, might I add. So, congratulations, Joe. But last week's trivia question was whose ear did Peter cut off? Right? And she answered correctly that Peter cut off the ear of Malchus, who is the high priest's slave, right? And it's a story that if you've been in the church streets, especially around Easter, that you hear quite often. It's a story that I have heard often growing up in these church streets. But I think it was the first time that I really stopped to think about Peter, that I really stopped to think about him in the story outside of just, he did this thing, he cut off the servant's ear. I think it's the first time that I thought, but who was Peter, right? Like what was going on in Peter's world? And like what was happening in his world as a whole, right? And so I want to talk about that, right? If you think other people need to hear this conversation, be sure to share this out, right? But to say that Peter had a roller coaster of emotions is an understatement, right? He had been told by Jesus that he would betray him 3 times before the rooster crowed. He had fallen asleep despite Jesus's passionate pleas to asking him to stay awake and pray with him. He had seen a mob approach Jesus, right? And an angry mob wielding swords and clubs. And he had also now, right before this, just seen Judas betray Jesus with a kiss, the exact thing that Jesus said would happen. And so I imagine that Peter was overcome, right? Just overcome with rage, fear, anxiety, stress, and that when he gripped the handle of the knife and started swinging wildly, like anybody could get it at that time, right? He was so stressed out. It was like anybody can catch these hands, right? If you want smoke, Peter's got smoke. Okay, he was ready to pop off. He was so stressed. And so whoever was the nearest one to him was gonna get it. It happened to be the high priest servant, and boop, off came the ear. An outburst that is now forever etched in the Bible, right? Hello, Stacy. And it got me kind of thinking that which of our own, this one hurts a little bit, but which of our own outbursts are forever etched in someone else's story? And how do we glimpse Jesus's passion, not just in this story, but in our lives too? All right, so I want to talk about it. And a crown rocker first, super excited. Hey, Matt. Super excited, but we sort of kind of have a guest. And I think it's kind of nice that our guest, and you will soon understand why it's in air quotes, is my mentor. So I am really excited for you guys to glean from her wisdom. But before we do that, we got to play the intro video, right?
It's a mindset shift. Happiness is the key to success. Stardust in the building. Let's go. Oh, what a feeling. This happy feeling. Happy. I can't explain. This happy feeling. Happy. Oh, what a feeling.
All right, so officially, welcome back to the Everyday Crown Rocker podcast, your go-to source for faith, growth, and all things Crown Rocker. And I am your host, Jasmine Tossett Smith. And today we are talking about grace in the garden, right? And specifically, I'm talking about we'll be in a couple chapters in John. But in John 18, verses 1 to 10, is where we witness a profound moment in Jesus's journey to the cross, right? This passage not only reveals just like the depth of human emotions, but also it showcases the incredible grace and forgiveness of the Savior. And as I said in the intro, our boy Peter was having a rough day. Okay, our boy was going through it. He'd been told by Jesus that he would betray him 3 times before the rooster crowed. He had fallen asleep, even though Jesus had passionately pleaded with his boys to stay awake and pray with him. He had seen an angry mob show up with swords and clubs and had witnessed Judas betray Jesus with a kiss, right? Talk about emotional stacking, right? One thing after the other. And who better, well, I was thinking to myself, who better to explain emotional stacking than the person who helped me understand emotional stacking and understand my own emotional stacking behavior. So I'm going to let my mentor, Latara Venice, explain it to you. And also be sure to subscribe to her channel as well. She will give you more gems, plenty gems. She has a lot of gems, okay, that you can add to your crown and rock it every day. But she does a brilliant job of explaining emotional stacking. And so I want you to hear it from her.
As an entrepreneur and a coach, you have to learn how to find balance in your life. And one of the ways you learn how to find balance in your life is learning how to remove or work through what I call emotional stacking. What do I mean by emotional stacking? Here is what can happen in a typical morning or a typical day. You get up, right? You get up, you're walking to the bathroom, maybe you stub your toe. I'm reaching over and getting something. Maybe you stub your toe. Oh man, okay, let me go brush my teeth. I can't, ouch. Let me go brush my teeth. But you're mad because you stubbed your toe and you're in pain, okay? Brush your teeth, get yourself together. You start moving through the house and you go and the dog has had an accident. Oh man, I gotta clean that up now. Your toe hurt and the dog done had an accident, okay? There's all this stuff going on. You take care of all of that. You fuss at the dog. Fido, you tell Fido, don't do that no more. Please let me know when you got to go outside. But you overslept. So Fido's like, I did try to tell you, but you overslept and you're mad because you overslept, right? So here's all these emotions going on. I'm talking about emotional stacking, okay? And then what ends up happening is you get in your car, you get it all together, you start driving down the street, and some dude just comes in front of you and cuts you off. What you gonna say then? You're going to say, well, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. I doubt it. Another negative emotion that you're dealing with. You go to work, things are not quite working the way that you want them to work, right? And so then, you start all through the day. All these things are happening. You never stop not one time to consider how all of this stuff is sitting on your soul, which is your mind, your will, and your emotions, how it's sitting at the seat of your heart and you won't even deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, what ends up happening is it stacks and it stacks and it stacks and it stacks until you get buried and it blows. You get buried and it blows, right? And I call this emotional stacking because this is what we do. We stack on emotions and we don't deal with it. How do you deal with it when you are in the moment of a flow? I got to get up. I got things I have to do. I have to get to work. I have to do this. The number one thing is to stop and breathe. Stop and breathe. Because literally breathing helps to lower your pressure, your blood pressure, and it helps to give you fresh oxygen to your brain and to your heart. And they communicate and go, okay, time to calm down. What else do? Keep a journal or take your phone and just go, man, this just happened, and boom, boom, boom. And then at the end of the day, go back and reflect on that thing so that you don't go to sleep on it. And do a brain dump at the end of the evening so that you're calmer. Maybe your brain dump is with a friend, or maybe it is in a journal, or maybe you draw. Whatever it is you do a brain dump. Do a decompression moment. Decompress from the day. Don't go to bed. Let me get my stuff. Holding on to all of this, because it will sit on your heart. It will sit. And when I say your heart, I don't just mean spiritually. And I don't just mean emotionally. I mean physically. Literally, emotions can cause illnesses. Undealt with emotion can cause illness to happen to you. And you're wondering why you don't feel well, why your energy is low, because you don't take the time to sort through and to really figure out what's going on with you emotionally. Do me a favor. Take care of yourself by making sure you're tending to your soul. What's happening from one day to the next? What's going on with you, right? It's going to be a couple of links in here. It's going to lead you to a couple of things that can help you and can assist you in making sure that you are not stacking emotionally, but you are releasing that stuff where it needs to go, which is in the lap of our Father. Because what did Jesus say? To give him your burdens, because his yoke is easy and his burden is light. So take that time to do that today. Bye-bye.
So good. So good. Was it not so good? Let me know just how good that was in the comments. I love the way she explains it, the way she breaks it down. And I think this was our boy Peter, right? He could have, he needed a Latara Venice in his life to help him work through some of the things that he was going through, right? But in John 18, verses 3-7, Peter, in this moment of zeal, and I have no doubt fear and anxiety and stress, right, that had built up, stacked up, just things happening, boom, 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 drew his sword and struck the high priest's servant, right, cutting off his ear. His impulsive act, I think, also reflects on us, our tendencies to react emotionally in challenging situations. Not just you and I, Crown Rocker, because the dudes feel it too. So, and we have a dude on tonight. So yay. But we all, right, I think, especially in this day and age, just like Latara said in the video, with all this go, 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 it's easy for us to stack things one on top of each other and not really stop to take the time to process it. And then poof, it just comes out in a torrent of whatever, right? Comes out. And I say this with no judgment, right? I've been there too. I've yelled at the kids, right? For no other reason than just a buildup of stuff happening, and then it comes out, right? Word vomit. In retaliation, I've lashed out, physically at a partner. I have used my words to cut like a knife, right? Not my brightest or my proudest moments by any stretch of the imagination. But so often, like Latara talked about, we can allow those little things to pile up onto other things. And then along with the big things that come along. And then before we realize it, we're pissed off and angry and blowing up about all the things. Right? Before you and I, though, excuse me for that. But you and I have two amazing things that are working in our favor, right? Number one, the biggest one, we have God's grace, right? Praise the Lord, we have God's grace because the Lord knows we need it. And because he knew we needed it, he gave it to us, right? And number two, we have a sound mind, right? We've been given a sound mind that has the ability to be renewed. So we can learn, we can change, we can grow, we can make amends and do better going forward. And we don't have to stay stuck. So extraordinary influence, right, is what I've titled this next section. But I think about the last part of the Everyday Crown Rocker tagline, where it says that we allow God to add his extra to our ordinary for extraordinary influence. And I think this passage, or the story we talk about now, can give us an example of this, right? Jesus rebukes Peter, demonstrating that his kingdom is not advancing through violence or through impulsive actions, right? And you and I are reflections of the kingdom in the spheres that we move in. We are ambassadors of the kingdom in the spaces that we inhabit, at work, at school, at home, on that random trip to that state park that you took that one year, right? In the checkout line at the store, in the drive-through line while you're waiting for your coffee, in the queue waiting to go into the concert, right? Out here in these internet streets, right? You are an ambassador of the kingdom wherever you go. And when we get a handle on our emotions, right, when we learn emotional maturity and how to process through all of those things so that we don't lash out at everybody, when we learn how to properly deal with our own emotional stacking, the benefits are not only for us but for the world around us, right? As the crown rockers that we are, created for extraordinary influence. And like I always say, influence doesn't just mean you are an influencer or you're speaking from a stage or from a pulpit or in front of people, right? Your extraordinary influence, your impact can be one on one. The impact you have on your kids, the impact that you have on your friendships, the difference you make in your workplace, right? So it doesn't have to be some big grand thing for it to be extraordinary influence, right? It just means you being your UES self, touching the lives of other people around you and making their lives, their space, your world, your community better because you're in it. And so, drawing from the video and what Latara said, taking a few beats, right, to take those deep breaths, to stop and take a few deep breaths in and out, allows for fresh oxygen to your brain and to your heart. And that could be the very difference between lashing out or letting that petty thing go, right? A couple breaths could be the difference between um, yelling and cussing or being like, you know what? Ain't nobody got time for this. Ain't nobody got time to be a petty Betty. I'm gonna move right on, right? And not in a avoiding it way, but just in taking those few breaths to deal with what's going on, to check on yourself, like what is actually going on, and then to respond appropriately from that, right? Sometimes you just have to walk away, think about it, and then come back to that conversation, once you've had a moment to decompress. You might need more than a couple breaths, but for sure start with a couple breaths. Okay. Taking it out in a safe space, right? Taking out whatever, all the meh that you're going through, in a safe space like your journal, via voice memo, calling a trusted friend, right? That could save you from making poor word choices, out of anger, out of your frustration, out of your fear, and give you the release necessary to process through the emotion and speak words of life into the situation instead, right? Even if the only life giving words you can say to yourself are walk away, then more power to you. You have done a good job, right? Because sometimes, like I said before, you just have to walk away and come back to it at a different time. Doing a brain dump, like she said, at the end of the day, helps you sort through your thoughts, sort through your feelings, get them out of here and out into the world, instead of just ruminating on them and letting them circle around and around in your head. so that they don't weigh heavily on you, but instead you can let go of what does not serve you and do the hard work around the things that you do indeed need to confront, right? And do work around. And so, um, for sure, I wish that I am glad though that we have the story of Peter, because then I don't feel so alone. I feel seen, right? Like, oh, you know what? And Peter did some amazing things for the kingdom, all right? But I feel a little like, okay, you know what? Oh, like that's my boy. Like, okay, I get it, right? And for sure, he needed a Latara Venice in his life, because our boy didn't learn right then, right? Because he was back at it again. You can read that John 18, verses 15 to 18, and then again in 25 to 27, right? Even after he cut off that man's ear, he didn't have time to process it, right? He didn't process it. It was just another thing that went on the stack. And as you read the story, you can see our boy piling it on, right? Um, but that's so much of us. That's so much of what we do, especially in a hustle, grind, go out and get it, pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of culture that we live in, right? This instant microwave culture where you feel like you constantly have to be on, you have to know the right thing to say, you must be showing up at the things, you must show up in a certain way online. It can be easy to forget that you need to take the time to deal, right, with all of that gunk, right, in order for you to be healthy, for you to be well, for you to show up as your best self in the world, and not be out here just recklessly cutting off ears, right? um, you need to do that work. uh, so two major things that I do love, switching now to talking about how this story just exemplifies God's grace, right? Is I'm going to talk about grace in the garden, and then also grace on the beach. But grace in the garden, I think, is for them, right? So in my mind, I think of grace in the garden is for them, grace on the beach is for me, is for us, right? So Jesus shows compassion to the wounded servant, right? And he heals his ear. He doesn't just let the man bleed, picks up the ear, fixes it, right? Exemplifying his grace even in the midst of his own arrest, right? Jesus has compassion for us, and he sees the wounds that others have inflicted on us, right? And he wants to heal them. He wants to restore you, right? He wants to heal those places and those spaces where others have wounded you, right? Sometimes the wounds that you suffer have nothing to do with you, right? You were minding your own business, okay, in a mob, right? Because your boss works for the people that are trying to get the guy. The boss is like, oh my gosh, let's go join this mob. You're like, oh, all right, dude. There you are, riding around the streets, okay, with your boss, involved in a mob because he said, let's do it, right? You're his servant. What, you going to say? No, you can't. So there you are. You go to, and boop, it's your ear that gets cut off, right? You are collateral damage in the dysfunction of somebody else's life, right? Um, who else has been there, right? Like, just think of your own story. I'm pretty sure you can think of even one story that relates to that. Or maybe the servant was like you, was a willing participant, right? We don't know the details, but maybe the servant was just as gung ho, and was just um, as instrumental, right, in the shenanigans that was going on. Maybe you were part and parcel of the happenings and the goings on, right? And because you were part of them, that led you to suffer damage at the hand of someone else. Either way, God's will for you is wholeness, right? Whatever road led you, um, whichever way or whatever happened to cause that to happen or that led to that outcome, that same road can lead you to him, right? He wants to heal you. He wants to heal your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, your very character. He wants to restore you to his factory settings, right? Not to leave you living below the standard that he set, but to call you up higher to the standard that he has set for you, that he always had, right? This good place that he always had in mind for you. He wants you to revert back to his perfect original design, right? To awaken you to who he called you to be, to bring out of you what he placed in you and what he created you for in the first place, right? So not to bring you to a place of, oh, I want her to see this so that she's condemned, right? No, but to call you higher. Yes, bosses can be horrible, right? Bosses, listen, I don't know, but if I was that servant, I know that the man couldn't like quit his job, but I'd be like, really? Are you, are you for real right now? I am out here doing my job to the best of my ability, and then it's my ear that gets cut up. Listen, I have a lot of questions for a lot of somebodies, right? But God's grace and his mercy is enough even for that, right? He healed the servant, total complete healing, right? Not partial. His ear wasn't just dangling off, to the side, or we're told it was, he healed it, right? Complete and total healing. And that is your portion too, right? So even though you may have been a willing participant, maybe you weren't, right? His portion for you is still grace. His desire for you is still healing. His portion for you is still hope and restoration, right? And calling you into the fullness of the amazingness of who he created you to be, right? So whether you wanted it to happen, didn't want it to happen, it happened, right? But he is compassionate. He looks at you with compassion and is heartbroken that this thing happened to you, but then wants to heal you and restore you to wholeness, right? Um, he sees the damage. He knows who and how that damage was inflicted, and he wants to heal the wound. Right? In Crown Rocker U, we will do the heart work, the kingdom soul care, that is about more than merely just giving you the tools and the tips and the strategies, right, to do the heart work, but also partnering with you and helping you to stay accountable to the healing that you have begun, right? It's a process, it's a journey, my own process, and I've shared it on here too. In Crown Rocker U, I go into more detail, but going from trauma to triumph, right? Going from being a victim to a victor, going from inferiority to influence is a process, right? And we all need each other to walk that thing out in the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, right? So if any of this so far is resonating with you, then for sure I want to invite you to join us for Crown Rocker U. Enrollment is open now. I will make sure that I put the link in the description, but you have been officially invited to join us. All right, grace on the beach, right? For you. So just as there is grace for the ones that wound you, right? So he will deal with them. They are his babies. Okay, they are his sons, his daughters. He knows what they did, why they did it, all the things, right? He will deal with them. And even as he's dealing with them, he will heal your wounds, right? So there's grace for them. But there's also grace for you, as the one doing the wounding. Uh, Not necessarily the part that we like to think about, but if you've lived for a hot second, you wounded a couple people, right? Like you have been the one wielding the knife and cutting off an ear. Um, but Jesus did not only heal the servant's ear, right? So what we've just talked about, but later in John 21, so in John chapter 21, we see that Jesus healed Peter's heart too. John 21, verses 15 to 19, tell us that 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loves him, right? And I think it's so beautiful that he asked him one time for each of the 3 times that Peter had denied him, right? Restoring each and every one, right? Jesus has compassion for you too. He wants to heal, um, he wants to heal you of the wounds that you have inflicted on others as well, right? Not to heap guilt or condemnation on you, but to rid you of guilt and condemnation. And I don't know about you, right? But I have a tendency to beat myself up and ruminate on the wrong things I've done, right? Kind of play that over and over, the poor choices I've made, the people that I've hurt along the way. And that guilt sometimes can feel overwhelming. And I can burn myself out just like trying to do, right? Trying to do all the things to make up for it, even if I don't talk to that person anymore, or even if I have asked already for forgiveness, and that relationship has come to an amicable end. Sometimes internally, I'm still beating myself up about like you shouldn't have said that to that person. You shouldn't have done that. Um, like why? Like why you like this girl? Why you like this? Right? Um, but Jesus wants to heal you of that too, right? Of that feeling of needing to pay some sort of imaginary penance to finally be right, to chasing that goal that you feel like you just never get there, like you can never do enough to make up for it. But that's not how God's grace works, right? He forgives our sins and he casts them as far as the east is from the west. He doesn't berate us or belittle us. No, he forgives us and then goes even further and gives us the wisdom that we need to do better, to live in peace with others in a way that he intended, right? He doesn't require some sort of crazy penance, right? Or self-flagellation, beating yourself um, with, with a rope, right? He lavishes his grace on us. He restores our souls. He sets our feet on the right path, showing us what we need to do so that we don't continue to walk down the same road, right? So that we don't continue to have the same outbursts, right? Or continue a cycle of the same pattern over and over and over, right? His grace extends to us too, to break that cycle and give us what we need to learn to lay it down, right? We get to give that to him, give it to his feet. And the key to this is not to run from him when we make mistakes, but instead to run to him. So in this, when you guys read it, because as you know, y'all always got to do your own reading, right? So as we read in John 21 verses 15 to 19, when Peter sees Jesus on the beach or on the shore, right? He immediately jumps out of the boat and runs to Jesus, right? He didn't linger or dilly dally or be like, oh my gosh, like, oh, what's Jesus gonna say? Because, okay, well, I denied him 3 times and now I should probably do all these things before. No, he saw him, immediately hopped out of the boat. Okay, the boat wasn't even to shore yet. He was like, I don't care that the boat is not docked yet. I know where I gotta be, and I gotta be with Jesus, right? He didn't, um, he came as he was, right? I imagine, I mean, they'd been fishing all night. I imagine he smelled absolutely gross. Okay, sweat, fish, bleh. Okay, not looking all put together, hadn't just been to the barber, not looking fresh. He just came as he was. He didn't take a detour home, talk about some, oh, I got to shower and I got to come clean first. I got to do all these things to come clean. No, he just came as he was. He didn't say, oh, before I run there, let me, head on to the temple first and do all these rituals. Before I can come. No, he went straight to Jesus. He came as he was, straight to Jesus, right? And we can do the same thing too when we mess up. We can immediately go to Jesus and ask for not only his forgiveness, which of course we ask for, but also his infinite wisdom in how to move forward, right? How to make amends where we need to make amends, how to lay down our guilt and our shame so that we don't live in condemnation, right? So that the things that we have done that have caused harm, we can learn the lessons from those things and live better, right? And influence, right? Again, that extraordinary influence, but he can add his extra to our ordinary so that we can have extraordinary influence. We can show our children what it's like not just to forgive others, but what it looks like to forgive ourselves, right? We can show our friends, our family, what it looks like to do the hard work, to be healed and whole, and to live that out, right? We can show, just by our being, right, by our complete surrender to being like, dang, I messed up, taking it to Jesus and letting him take it. We can use those lessons, right, even just living out those lessons, to be the ambassador of the kingdom that we are called to be, right? We don't have to be shouting from the rooftops, right? A lot of times, your lifestyle, how you live, how you show up speaks volumes, right? How I show up at home with my children, how I show up with my friends, how I show up at church. But also, I shouldn't be different people, right? There is freedom, and there is freedom when you have, just trust, and you know that you can come to Jesus with whatever it is, whatever you have done, whatever has been done to you. And there is freedom in being able to let it go, being able to lay it at his feet, and know that he's taking care of it. And so I don't have to live with a mask on, right? I don't have to live under guilt, shame, or condemnation. I can show up in all the places, spaces, and place, and in all the things that I do as me, right? With no guilt, with no shame, reset, or on the way to being reset to the standard that he has, right? So him calling me up, calling me out, calling me higher to the standard that he set for me, instead of lowering my standard to like my base level, right? So um yeah, I like the story, right? I, like I said, I never really thought about Peter in this way until I read the story again recently. And I just want to challenge you, Crown Rocker, to look at your own life, right? And to do the hard work. Commit to yourself that you will do the hard work necessary, right? To start, so that the emotional stacking that we've been doing, so you can start working that out, right? Peeling back the layers, actually doing the hard work around it to heal, not just band-aid over it, not just put a patch over it. And I can tell you from experience, parts of it are going to hurt. There's going to be parts of it that are ugly that you don't want to face, but the joy of that is that you do not face it alone, right? You can take it straight to the feet of Jesus. and he looks at you with compassion and love, not with guilt or condemnation. He is standing there saying, please, please just give it to me. Give it to me so that I can replace all that gunk, all that angst, all that anxiety, all that striving, all that grinding with my peace, with my patience, with my wisdom, right? He wants to take it from you so that he can give you something better, right? God is a good, good father. He's not taking it from you because you've been a bratty child. He wants to give you better, right? He wants to replace your mourning with dancing. He wants to give you beauty instead of ashes, right? He wants to give you a garment of praise, right? He wants to lavish his love on you. And that's why he's ushering you towards it. That's why he's beckoning you near. That's why he's saying, give me your stuff, right? He is big enough. He can handle it, right? He can take it, right? And so that is my challenge to you, is to really just look at your own situation. What areas are you, or in what ways have you been emotionally stacking? And what things do you need to start working on and letting go of, right? And again, if this is you, if you're needing help, support, just kind of tools, strategies, just practical kingdom wisdom, right, around these things, then I implore you, join us for Crown Rocker U. Enrollment is open now. I will make sure that I put the link in. But that is the goal, right? Is to equip you, to encourage you, to empower you to continue working, living, breathing, doing all the things, right, in partnership with your Heavenly Father, and allowing Him to add His extra, to your ordinary for extraordinary influence, right? So that is all I have. Like, subscribe for more of this, but just thank you for joining me. Let me know in the comments too, just your own thoughts around this, your own, like, just questions, comments. If you've ever looked at Peter's story like this, right? If you've ever seen our boy Peter kind of in this light before, and some of your takeaways and your ahas from this. So I am yeah, I'm excited. I think I'll be stewing on this one for a bit. I think there's just so much more richness that I am yet to unpack. So I'm excited to be and just dig, just sinking deeper into the story, and all of the richness that comes out of it. So until I see you guys next time, just remember that you are an ordinary, everyday, an amazing, ordinary, everyday woman living in partnership with your Heavenly Father, and allowing Him to add His extra to your ordinary for extraordinary influence.